All right, we're back on the aggregate. Today's guest is Kenny Farley Jr. Hello, sir. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm great. Thanks for having me on. I've enjoyed watching the other interviews you've had. So this is an
Yeah,
honor.
absolutely. Me and the clowns, we get things going sometimes on here. It's fun to watch. But just the quick background on me and Kenny for the viewers. Kenny came in and coached for a few years at Wilsonville with me. Hadn't met him before then, didn't know anything about him. Was our receivers and defensive back coach. We had a lot of fun. I'll just lead this. If people were to ask me what's your one memory of coaching with Kenny, it would have to be the Crater game at home. The very first game I was an offensive coordinator at the varsity level my entire life. I'm nervous as hell. We lost Bailey pregame. Bailey was with us and she was all of about 8 or 9 years old. And I remember she walked off with Jason Millen to go to the bathroom and he came back and she didn't. And he was like, "Oh, I thought she was back here." So I'm chasing all around Wilsonville, the whole damn campus trying to find her. And finally I find her. Like I said, I'm nervous as hell. I'm like, God, we're playing John Beck and Crater, who was really good at the time. And John's a great coach. And I don't want to disappoint Doug. We get the ball early on and we give it to KJ on sweep, and he goes 50 to 55 yards. He takes one to the house.
Yeah.
And I felt the sting of a slap on my ass like I had never felt in my entire life. And it was just like, what just happened? And you had given me the butt pat from the gods. Zeus turned your arm into a lightning bolt and slapped me on the ass, which you had a tendency to do.
Oh yeah.
And it really, like I said, it kind of loosened. It was just like, oh, okay. And then Crater, a couple of their kids ended up getting hurt, and we beat the shit out of them that game. But I believe at the end of that game, too, you were so excited for us to get the win that also you jumped on my back. You took a sprint from about 10 yards and jumped on my back. And folks, Kenny is not a small dude. He's 6'3" couple 100 pounds, 215 maybe.
Yeah.
And I just remember that. So anyway, I digress. Kenny's on today because I think he's got a really interesting journey from where he started from and where he is now. So we're going to start at the beginning. And at the beginning, I'm looking at, is it Lakewood? Is that where you come from?
So that's where I call home. But I came from a divorced household, right? And so I teased my mom and said she was a nomad. So I lived all over Southern California, but I call Lakewood home because that's where my dad, my stepmom put roots down, bought a house when I was in the 4th grade. And so that was like the first real foundational place that wasn't an apartment that I lived in. So I've just always called that home. And then I went to high school in Lakewood as well. So.
Okay. And so I pulled it up here. Forgive my whiteness, but that's awfully close to Compton. What did you get any of that gangster stuff? Did you get any of that leakage from that Compton area, or just being in that Southern California? What was the gang situation?
So actually the gang situation hit really close to home. So my dad grew up in Watts. And so he grew up in the streets, was raised by the streets. And so have a lot of family in Compton, in Carson, Long Beach, all in that area, affiliated with the Blood Street Gang. And so a lot of my close relationships growing up were with active gang members, right? I mean, it was, it wasn't the stuff you saw in the movies. Those folks were family, right? In our family. And so, it was just I grew up in it on my dad's side. It was really important to him to immerse us in that, to know his family, to know what life in the streets was like, and bless him for sheltering us from that, right? We got to go there and then come out of it, so to speak. And so we saw all the money, the cars, the women, everything else. But you also, you know, went to the funerals, right? And saw people we love go to prison. And so you understood both sides of that. So it wasn't something glamorous, at least for me, right? And my siblings to say, yeah, hey, we want to emulate that. It was like, no, let's go do something different. And so yeah, in Lakewood, specifically where I went to high school, I would say it was like 80% Mexican. And so at that time, that's where really the violence was be like the blacks against the Mexicans. We had a very small population of white kids. The next largest group were Asian folks, immigrants from different parts. So yeah, the high school when I was there were definitely definitely a lot of instances where things went sideways, but thankfully I was never a victim to it or people that I cared about. So
That's interesting. That is interesting. So mom kind of moved around, dad put roots down in, like you said, fourth grade. What kind of a kid were you? Like, were you energetic ADHD bounce off the wall kid? Were you sit back in my room and read a book kid? What kind of kid were you?
I was introvert, really bad, which fast forward to, and we'll get to that, right? With who I am today, my mom still shakes her head like, how did that little boy turn into who you are? So yeah, when I was really small, there were only like 3 people that could babysit me because I was that kid where my mom knew that somebody was looking at me because I would do this moan, right? And to the point where my grandfather was like, you should probably go get that boy checked out because there might be something wrong with him, right?
Well, autism.
And so yeah, but was always with like my people, like with my family, with people I was comfortable with. I'd say I was an energetic kid. Always playing outside, have a huge family, bunch of cousins at the time. So was always outside playing, getting in trouble. At school, I was the kid that would get suspended from school every year.
Oh.
I think that went all the way through till I was in the 6th grade. But yeah, just high energy, disruptive in class. But that was just because my home life wasn't the greatest. Not a lot of stability, and so that was just me acting out from feelings. But yeah, I think really who I am authentically, and I'm still that way. Need to be alone to recharge. And so from an early age, my parents knew that I had to be in sports to release energy. And so that was what really pushed me into playing sports as a young kid.
Okay, so they use that as almost like an outlet for your energy and kind of just a therapy as from a spastic kid. You want to get him in that. It's very common. A lot of people are like, hey, let's get that energy off on the court or on the field. Yeah. And that's great. Were you a sports fan when you were younger? Like, did you have any idols like in the area or even nationwide? Did you watch NBA or NFL? Like, did you have any of those idols growing up?
So I did. So I was a huge sports fan, and really I was a fan of family members. And so I come from a family of cousins, uncles, on my dad's side, and then also on my mom's side. And so grew up going to high school football games, grew up going to college football games, basketball games, baseball games. And so yeah, I even had cousins who were like cheerleaders, and my parents would take me to their games to go watch them cheer, and I'd go out on the field, and one of the high school kids would let me carry their helmet around, right? And so that was just always was around it. And I do appreciate that my grandparents would, even if we didn't know who was playing on a Friday night, would bundle us up and we'd go watch a game. Didn't know anybody that was out there, but I would just be mesmerized, focused. And so grew up a huge LA Dodgers fan. And so would watch games with my grandfather, with my uncles, with my dad, would go to Dodger Stadium often to watch games, to the point where I didn't grow up with a lot of financial means. And so birthday parties were held at the park, right? And you'd go get some store-bought fried chicken, some other things,
Sure.
and it was all about just having family and community, right? And so there would be a Little League baseball game going on. And if the team were blue and white, they were the Dodgers to me, right? And so I'd go and get excited, and I thought it was the same people playing on TV as I was watching little kids play Little League baseball, right? And so,
Well, that was a good time to be a Dodgers fan. I mean, when you were a kid, I mean, you had the Kirk Gibson, Oral Hershiser, those kind of late '80s, early '90s Dodgers were pretty damn good.
They were. And so, yeah, Jose Offerman, I loved Brett Butler. There were a lot of players. And so then was also a Raiders fan. So when I was really young, when my dad and mom were still together, we lived not too far away from the LA Coliseum. And so, the Raiders were playing there. And so I would go to games, to Raiders games. Unfortunately, I'm still a Raiders fan today, as painful as that is. And then as I got in high school, Lakewood is not too far away from Anaheim, right? And so it's you take one street all the way down, it's about 30 minutes, and you're in Anaheim and you're at Angels Stadium. And so in high school, would go to Angels games, and that's why today I'm more of an Angels fan than I would say I am a Dodgers fan. But one little veer off, really cool story. Garrett Anderson was an outfielder for the Angels, and so my dad would, after school, he'd come home and he had a motorcycle, and he'd say, hey, let's go to a game. And so I'd hop on the motorcycle and we'd go. And so this one game we went, it was Garrett Anderson's rookie year. His dad was out front looking for a father and son to give free tickets to, right? And so he spotted me and my dad. We come in, we sit with Garrett Anderson's family, we sit with his agent. His wife is there, and Garrett has a good game, and his dad's like, hey, if the Angels win, I'll take you down into the clubhouse. And so the Angels won that game. So we get to go in the locker room. I mean, guys are still changing, they're getting interviewed, and walked away there with a bunch of signed merchandise. And so that really sealed the deal for me to be an Angels fan. It was actually one of the coolest sports experiences I've ever had.
That's fun. And you always remember Garrett Anderson. That's pretty random. But it's funny how those guys who can be random and who aren't, because Garrett Anderson was good, not great.
Yeah.
But it's funny how those guys stick in your head forever. I mean, I remember him being a sports fan back then as being, a pretty solid player. Yeah. But to you as a kid, he's a great player.
Absolutely.
And I mean, he's always going to be this awesome player because he did that. And that's a great reminder that, I mean, there are really good ones out there.
Yeah,
that will just do that and kind of shows you that when you do achieve something that you need to give back, and you need to pass it forward or pass it down or however you look at it. But that's a great story. That's fun. I didn't know that. So you get into athletics. What did you play before high school? What sports did you play?
So as a kid, I played baseball, and then I also played football. And then I didn't play basketball till the 7th grade, and that's a whole nother story why I started playing basketball. I was never really a basketball fan. I was a fan of the Lakers, was a fan of the Bulls because of Michael Jordan. But as far as playing basketball, never really wanted to play basketball. But baseball, I loved playing as a kid. And then football, I forced my parents into putting me into tackle football, right? I mean, like I said, I'd grown up watching cousins and uncles, and, it was in my blood. And I think I was like 7 years old, right? And I'm like, let's go sign up for football. And no, right? And my mom didn't want me to play football at all, ever. Right. And
I don't think any moms do.
Yeah, fair. And even though she grew up, her brothers, my uncles all played football. It was in our family, right, in our blood. But she's like, nope, I don't want you to play. And so they put me in flag football. And that was fun for a minute. But then the kids in my age group, all the parents were complaining that I was playing too rough, right? And so then they moved me up to the older kids, right? And there I was holding my own. And I was getting my butt kicked and getting pushed down. And then the coach of that team, as I remember it, told my mom that this kid needs to be playing tackle football, right? Like this isn't it. And so signed up. I believe I was 9 years old. We signed up. I played for Bellflower youth football. And my mom loved that because all of the teams, they were based off the Broncos. So all of the uniforms looked like the Broncos and were named after horses. So the Broncos, Stallions, Mavericks for different age groups. And so, and even then in California at that time, it was based off of weight, what level you played at, right? Okay. So it wasn't like a fourth grade team, a fifth grade team, sixth grade team. They took age into consideration, but it was more about your size. And so I played with kids 2 years older than I was because of how big I was at that time. And so played running back through youth football, played through Bellflower youth football for a number of years, and then went to Cerritos Hornets, played there for a number of years, and pretty much played every position on the field through youth football. Through baseball, was a good baseball player until they started throwing curveballs.
Well, you were Serrano for Major League. Like, you just didn't hit the curveball, but you decking the fastballs over the fence.
Agreed. And I have stories, right? And so at that time, so what I found interesting, so in California, there were so many kids, right? And such a concentration of kids that you'll play for one baseball league and it'll be in one city. And there's enough kids to field, 7, 8 different teams in each age group, right? And so you don't play other cities and other leagues until All-Stars, right? And so you're playing with all the kids, they're all at different schools and whatnot, but you know them to the point where they would tell me they were throwing the curveball and still couldn't hit it. And then once kids started, throwing gas, I wanted no parts of getting hit with the baseball. And so, and then I started playing basketball in the 7th grade because my sister, she decided, my sister's 6 foot tall, Camille, Camille, 6 feet tall. And so she got recruited to play basketball when she was in middle school. She's 2.5 years older than I am. So I would go out to her games and I had an opinion on how good she was. And I'd be real good in basketball. I'd be way better, right? And so it's like, okay, then go do it. And so I played basketball. I was good at it, right? But I think I peaked as like a sophomore in high school in my basketball prowess. So,
so you found your niche in football and baseball. Seemed like those were your loves.
Yeah.
And so you went to Artesia, yeah?
I did.
So, and let me bring this up because I don't know if I have the right one here.
The Artesia Pioneers on Delamo Boulevard.
Okay. So let's see.
Just type in Jason Capono or James Harden. So yeah, I think that is their new logo and mascot. That was not the way it looked when I went to school, but that was 25 years ago.
Were you the Pioneers still, or did you?
We were the Pioneers. We just had I think it was a Conestoga wagon that we had as our logo.
Okay. So go through that list again. You said James Harden went there. Who else went there?
So I played with Jason Capono. So UCLA.
I remember him from UCLA with the headband.
Yep. And then played with the Heat and played with some other folks in the NBA.
Sure.
Have a really funny story with him really quick. So I actually went to middle school with him as well. And so, he was this 6'7", tall, white kid at our school. And, we were the recess and lunchtime basketball warriors. And we'd all be hooping and we'd try to get him to play, right? Oh, come play with us, and he'd be like, "Nah, I'm just some goofy white dude. I can't play. Social media wasn't a thing then, right? So we didn't know that he was this AAU all-star, ranked super high, right, in the country. And so he was 1 year older than I am. So when I was in the 8th grade, he went to the high school and he's starting varsity as a freshman and just killing it. And so we're going to the games like, holy crap, that dude is a baller, right? And so, yeah, I played with him. Charles and Ed O'Bannon went to Artesia High School. I know you know them. They were there before I was.
I loved them at UCLA when they had Toby Bailey, and I mean they had a squad there. That was a great UCLA team.
Yeah, so those are Artesia alum, and then years after me, you had James Harden come through there, and then Artesia was always known as a basketball school, and so there's just name after name of kids who've graced that court.
Okay, so how many years did you play basketball there?
I played my freshman, sophomore, and did I play my junior year? I think I just played freshman and sophomore year basketball. So our freshman team was really good when I came in as a freshman. So we played a JV schedule and actually won quite a few tournaments. And then during the playoffs, I was moved up to varsity. And we made a run to the CIF. And CIF is the equivalent to like OSAA. And so CIF Southern section made it to the championship. We played at the Arrowhead Pond where the Mighty Ducks, the hockey team, where they play. I think it might be the Honda Arena now. But we played against Dominguez. So Tayshaun Prince was on that team. They had Kenny Bruner. They had a handful of other guys, and we lost to them by 4. And so that's
a big basketball school. I think Tyson Chandler went there too.
Tyson Chandler went there. Yeah, he was a freshman when I was a senior. Yeah, you get this big 7-foot freshman with an attitude and skills. And so, yeah, Dominguez was a big rival of Artesia in basketball, Long Beach Poly, whoever was good at the time. And so moved up to varsity as a freshman for the playoffs. And then the following year, my sister, Camille, had my oldest nephew, Christopher. And so I didn't really play sports my sophomore year, just so I could be home and help, because she had just graduated high school a year before that. And so I didn't play football that year. Actually, I don't think I played any sports that year, just so that I could be home to help out with my nephew. And then junior year, that might have been the second year I played basketball. And so I played JV as a junior, was decent, not very good. And then played baseball and football those years. And then senior year, played just baseball and football as well.
So how did football come to the forefront? Now you're saying that, you weren't a great basketball player.
No.
Okay. I beg to differ. I thought you were a decent basketball player the one time that we played together. How did it come to the forefront? Were you not a great baseball player too? Or did you just choose football, or how did that come?
I was a far superior football player. So baseball, if somebody asked what was my true passion, what's my favorite sport, even today, it's baseball. Right. Mm-hmm. I mean, I love going to games. I appreciate the game. I appreciate the life lessons of it. It's a game of failure. Life is a game of failure. It's how resilient you are and how many times you get up. Right. And so for me, but like I said, at that level, I mean, pitchers were throwing gas. Right. And so I'd be there. And so in baseball, we had our coach, Scott Luke. His brother was actually playing for the Dodgers at the team, Matt Luke, I believe. And so, we'd be taking BP, and we always had to, before you could hit a ball, you had to get hit with like 3 pitches, right? Because we were tough and you had to stand in there and we'd get in trouble for jumping out of the batter's box, right? And so they would all get pissed off because I'm like the football star, right? But I'm afraid to get hit with a baseball. But so literally I just played the field and pinch ran sometimes. And so people would DH for me. So I was on the baseball team, but rarely ever had an at bat, and I was perfectly fine with that. They just wanted me for my speed and my arm in the outfield. So I knew baseball, I wasn't going anywhere, right? And in football, it just came natural. I could play every position. In high school, I damn near did play every position. And so it was the most fun because it was the thing that was just the most natural, and I was really good at it. So.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize. I mean, hitting a baseball, the big debate is what's harder, hitting a curveball or hitting a golf ball. And those who have tried to do them both know they're both damn hard to do.
Yeah.
Like, and the golf ball is more frustrating because it's just sitting there. But yeah, when someone's smoking in high school an 80-mile-an-hour curveball at you, and a 90-mile-an-hour fastball, you want no part of that mess unless you're just really into it. So,
yeah.
And it sounds like your coach might have been psychotic too. You need to just be hit by pitches before you do anything. But that's beside the point. So you're playing football. It's coming natural to you. Did you know that you wanted to play after high school, or was it even a thought to you?
I did. And my mom pointed out that to me as a kid. She's like, as a kid, you always said you wanted to play college football, right? And so, growing up going to USC games, UCLA games, I have a first cousin who is a Nebraska Cornhusker legend, right? Was on the team that won national championships in the early 90s. And so college football was something that was on my radar. It got bleak for a couple of years because I tell you, when I had terrible high school football coaches, holy crap, right? And so our freshman team was pretty good. I didn't play my sophomore year. Our junior season, we went 2-8. Senior year, we went 5-5 and barely missed the playoffs. Lost the last game of the season to miss the playoffs. And so, but yeah, just had a lot of fun. I was not heavily recruited from any big schools coming out of high school. There were the Northridge, Sacramento State, some of the smaller schools. But because of, I think, how crappy our team was and a terrible job that our coaches did at the time of really pumping the kids and doing exposure. My parents didn't know. I didn't know, right?
Sure.
And there was actually I really didn't know how good I was, as silly as this sounds, until we were playing St. John Bosco, who's a national powerhouse now, right?
For sure.
We were playing against them my junior year at home, and my dad was on the chain gang, right? And so he's on the visitor sideline, and the head coach during the game just said, "Oh, which one is your son?" And my dad's like, "Oh, he's number 4." And their head coach said, "Why is he on this team?" And my dad's, "Well, we live down the street, yada, yada, yada." And the coach is like, "Why don't you bring him to St. John Bosco? Right? We would love to have him on our team." And at that time, they were really good. And so after my junior year, I really did consider transferring to St. John Bosco. I mean, it was like a 20-minute ride from my house. My older brother actually graduated from St. John Bosco. It's an expensive all-boys school. And so weighed the options, but I didn't want to leave all my buddies, right? And I said, "Hey, I'd rather grind it out with you guys, no matter how crappy we are." And so we ended up playing St. John Bosco my senior year at their place. and they had a stud offensive lineman. I wish I could remember his name. It was a tackle they had, ended up going to UCLA, and I believe went to the league. But their head coach took the time before the game, and he came and grabbed me, and he said, "Hey, there's a UCLA scout here, and I told him to watch you as well." Right? And I'm like, "Holy crap, that's pretty cool." Right? And so yeah, like I said, just didn't get heavily recruited after high school, and actually was going to stop playing football when I graduated high school. And it was my mom who, she never really ever got in my face. At that time, UPS was hiring and, was paying, $30 an hour, and I'm going to go get rich working at UPS right out of high school. And she said, "Nope, you're staying in school and you're going to keep playing football." And so that's why I ended up going to Fullerton.
So can I rewind this before we move on to the Fullerton experience?
Absolutely.
So, and I don't know if this came across in our time together at Wilsonville, but I am a huge Nebraska Cornhusker fan.
Yeah.
Jesse Staub and I actually bonded over that when we were there. One of our, our stud kids there. Was your cousin Terrell Farley?
He was not. He is Abdul Muhammad. He was number 27.
Oh, I know Abdul Muhammad too. Okay. As soon as you said, and I've never heard this from you before, that you had a cousin that played in the mid 90s. And I'm sitting here listening to your story, racking my brain, and I'm going, boy, Terrell Farley is probably the only one I could think of. Okay. So different last name.
Yeah.
Okay. Great player also. But all right.
And he actually ties into, once we get there, why I ended up coming to Oregon State. He is one of the big reasons why I came. Yeah. Why I became a Beaver.
Okay. So you head on to Fullerton.
Yeah.
All right. So, and this is a JC.
It is.
Okay. And then, so what brought you to that school specifically? Just kind of, it's close and it's there and we're just going to go, or was there any kind of football ties to it? How did you choose this school?
So the short answer is I actually now had a cousin who I went to high school with, who played football. He was a couple years older than I was, played at Artesia, and then he went and was playing at Fullerton. And he's like, "Hey, you should come play. You should come play here." Was not that close to my house, right? I didn't have a car, and so had to get rides out there. The closer community college was Cerritos College, and so they were recruiting me heavy because my senior year I played a lot of time at defensive end, right? Mm-hmm. And so Cerritos College, back in the day, they would redshirt kids right off the bat, right? They had a really good strength conditioning program. And so they would bring in high school kids, redshirt you, get you to gain weight, muscle, so that you were ready to play your redshirt freshman year and get scouted. And they actually had a really good, strong program at the time. And so it was go there and play defensive end, or it was go to Fullerton, who was not very good at the time. They've actually, in recent times, Fullerton is one of the premier junior colleges in Southern California. When I was there, it was not. But I went. My cousin drove me out there, met Gene Murphy, the head coach. He has since passed away, but great guy. Loved the coaching staff. The day I went out there, they were doing a combine. And so there were like some college scouts out there looking at their kids. You know, they're running the 40, they're doing the shuttle, they're doing different things. And so I went out and they're like, "Hey, do you want to run?" And I ran, and I was fast enough for them to say, "I don't think you're a defensive end, right? We need wide receivers. Would you want to be a wide receiver?" And at that point, I had never played wide receiver. We ran the wing tee in high school, so I was one of the wing backs. I probably caught 3 passes in my high school career, right? And so went to Fullerton, and I was going to be able to play right away, right? Or have the potential to play right away. And so that's what really sold me on going there. And so and to be with my cousin, my best friend, came with me, and so off to Fullerton we went. Had a really good first year. I remember the first practice, I was like fifth string wide receiver, and so I did a lot of time, as you know, when you're not getting reps, you do a lot of time watching other people, right, and taking mental reps. Ryan Roskelly, Coach Skelly, will never forget him. He was an Orange County kid, but he went and played football at Memphis, and came back and was coaching. I think was really the first coach that I really bonded with, and he pushed me, where even my parents couldn't push me, to the point where I was angry and would freak out, and he was just tough love that I needed, right? And so through injuries and just junior college football, I mean, you have people that show up one day and don't show up the next day because they either got arrested or did something else. And so by the second game of the season, I was starting at wide receiver, and had a really good freshman year. Was actually named a preseason All-American going into my sophomore year. But in high school, you take the SAT, you get cleared for clearinghouse, which means you can go to a 4-year school. I never filed that paperwork in high school. So I went to a junior college with the assumption that for me to leave, I would have to get an AA degree before you could go. So my coaches at the time were like, hey, have you ever applied for clearinghouse? There's a lot of Pac-10 schools that are looking at you. Big 10 schools are inquiring about you. So they helped me file the paperwork. It came back that, hey, I was eligible to leave now, right? And so I only played one season at a junior college, right? Thought I would play multiple, but ended up only playing one. Had a really good year, broke a couple of school records at the time there in receiving yards per catch. And so my first college offer was from Cal Berkeley. And so that was another moment when I was like, holy crap, like college football can be a reality, and I am good enough to go play big time college football. And so after the Cal offer, then it just started rolling in, right? Legendary coach John Robinson, who had been at USC forever. At the time, he was at UNLV. He came to campus, sat down with him, and I'll remember him forever just because he's like, listen, you're not going to come to UNLV, right? He's like, you're too good. He said, but I want you to know that if it doesn't work out anywhere else you are, that you have a home here, right? You have a scholarship here because we think you're a hell of a player and a hell of a person, right? And so it was, and his honesty to just come in there and say that was pretty cool. And so yeah, Fullerton will always be, for a lot of reasons, right? I mean, we could talk for 3 hours just on everything I learned there and how impactful it was, but it taught me how when coaches care, they can pull something out of a kid that even the kid doesn't know that they have in them, right? And so Gene Murphy, he's since passed away, but there's this book that had every Division I college in it, right? And addresses and how to get a hold of people. And he made me sit down and he's like, make a list of every school you would go to. And I am going to personally write them a letter and send them tape of you playing. And I'm like, holy crap, you didn't have to do that, right? But that was the kind of coach that he was. And then the last actually funny story in my Fullerton days, one of those schools that I wrote down that I would go to was BYU, right? And so
why?
I had my brother played with a kid in youth football and in high school, Jonathan Pittman, and he went to BYU, right? And so I just knew BYU from watching him on TV playing. And
So
so
you didn't know anything about the religious aspect of the school or anything like that?
So I knew that was pointed out to me, right? And they're like, Kenny, you're gonna get kicked out of school. You not talking to girls, right? And I'm like, they're like, you're gonna have to become Mormon or you're gonna have to get married before you do anything with anybody. And but so they bring, I think it was like 5 coaches, right, from the BYU. And at the time, I forget who the head coach was. And they were like, we all didn't believe that there was a black kid in Southern California who was not Mormon who wanted to come to BYU. So we all had to see it for ourselves, right? And one of the coaches is like, man, the girls are going to love you, right? And I'm like, but that's and that was a sign of, nah, maybe I shouldn't go there. I don't know how long I'm going to last at that school. So
well, Jim McMahon played there for a while, and he struggled a lot. It's not for nowadays. BYU and Utah State and those Mormon schools. Now it's pretty common if you're not Mormon to go there.
Yeah, agreed.
But back in that, I mean, you're talking back in that era, late 90s, probably wasn't as common. So good choice there. And why was Oregon State on your list?
So Gene Murphy was friends with Dennis Erickson, who was the head coach at Oregon State at the time. And so Dennis Erickson, had coached at Miami along with other places. And so Abdul, before he went to play for Tom Osborne at Nebraska, he had verbally committed to Miami, right? And so that's where he had signed and that's where he was going and everybody knew it. And it was a last minute switch that he went to Nebraska. And so Dennis Erickson was the coach at Miami at the time. And so so Abdul had nothing but great things to say about Dennis Erickson. Coach Murphy had nothing but great things to say about Dennis Erickson. I didn't know Oregon State from anybody else, right? The only time I really knew about them, I watched the Fiesta Bowl when they annihilated Notre Dame, right? It was really the first time when I was like, okay, that's a real school, right? And so really based off of those 2 recommendations of me going there, really sealed the deal for me. Because I will tell you, when I came on my recruiting trip to Corvallis, I was not impressed, right? I mean, you're a Southern California kid coming from the city. I remember getting picked up at PDX in the long drive down the 5 to get to Corvallis, and I'd never seen that many trees, that green, and I'm like, where are we going, right? And you pull off and you go on Highway 34 for another, seems like forever, and I'm like, are we going to this little farm town? And so
yes.
And so actually, when I actually took my recruiting visit in the summer because I was on the late recruiting cycle because I didn't find out till late in the process that I could even leave Fullerton. And so when I ended up showing up for football camp, a lot of the kids that I had met on my recruiting visit were shocked to see me because they were like, when you left, we were like, there's no way in hell that kid is coming here, right? Because I was literally that unimpressed with Corvallis. But I trusted, Coach Murphy and trusted Abdul's word as well.
Was it the city? Was it the campus? All of it?
It was the fact that, so yes, all of it. And it was in the summer, right? And I don't know if you've been to Corvallis in the summer, but it's a ghost town, right?
Tumbleweed,
I mean, the population shrinks to a couple of hundred, it seems like, when there's no students on campus. And so it was just so unfamiliar to me, right? And it was also a huge culture shock, right? I had never been to a place where the only people who looked like me were the people in athletics that were on my team or were on the basketball team, where, you go anywhere else and it was just all white people.
Yeah, that's definitely, you're an urban kid from a very urban, talking about one of the most urban places in America, the LA area. and you're going to Corvallis, Oregon. And again, you and I talked before the show about how young people are ignorant to the ways of the world. And nobody probably told you that most college towns are sleepy little towns.
Yeah.
And that's, usually recruiting happens in the fall and they take you to games, or they can take you in the winter or the spring, and you can go see basketball, or you can go see baseball or track, or there's kids there and they can show you the girls that are there too, which is a great way to recruit young men. And yeah, you came there in the summer and there's nothing open but the Dairy Queen and Safeway. And yeah, it's hard to do that unless this was before the era of facilities too, where they could wow you with the facilities. I mean, it was hard to get people to go to Oregon and Eugene.
Yeah.
If they had the facilities, that's one thing, but you're going in there, and Oregon State's always been kind of the stepchild. And so you're like, well, why would I come here? Yeah. So I get that, but you made it there. You made it to Oregon State. So tell me about your introduction to Oregon State now. Was Simonton still there when you got there?
So Ken Simonton was there and was a legend, right? And I didn't understand how much of a legend he was until we were staying. So for home games, right, you stay in a hotel, even though you're playing at home. And so Ken Simonton was the first game of the season, and we go to a hotel and people are like screaming and like running up to him for his autograph, right? And so yeah, that's when I realized, fast forward a little bit, but that's when I realized, his stardom. But you talk about somebody who was a professional in college. He was, a mentor really to everybody, right? His work ethic. I came in the same time as Steven Jackson. I came in the same time as Derek Anderson. I was a sophomore, coming in as a sophomore. They were coming in as freshmen. Jonathan Smith was the starting quarterback when my first year there. Mike Hass, who ended up winning the Bolitnikoff from Jesuit High School. We came in the same time. So there was, Nick Barnett was already on the team. Richard Siegler was on the team. Dwan Edwards was on the team.
I was just going to say, who'd you have? Was Tim Ewis there?
Tim Ewis was a tight end. When I first got there, yeah. And so we had some really good guys, right? Good teammates. But you talked about when you first get there, when camp first starts, I learned what competition was. Like truly understood what competition means. And so, the rookies, we started camp, a number of days before the vets came in, so that you could start learning the playbook. You could start understanding the flow of practice, the pace of practice, understanding expectations. That was a huge shock, right? Oh, you mean I have to run full speed all the time? I have to give 100% effort all the time? Like practice, we have to play like we're playing in a game? That was all unfamiliar to me, right? To the point where you start doubting yourself and your ability, right? And I think that was the point, because they would, when the vets would come on, I remember them pulling us to the side and saying, hey, you see all these guys out here? They'd start asking each one of us, what were your accolades? Oh, I was all this. I was all state. I was this, that, and the other. And they're like, so was everybody else that's out here on this field, right? And their job is to keep you from taking their job, right? And your job is to take theirs, right? And so that level of competition, at that time, I think we were doing 3 a days, right? And so you'd come out the first practice and, say you were third string. Well, if in that first practice, 1 or 2 in front of you didn't practice very well, you might walk out that second practice as number 1, right? And I remember there was a practice my first year there where I was a starter, right, for that practice, and got all the 1 reps. And I think I ended up dropping a couple of balls and didn't do something right. And I came out the same day, the next practice, and I think I was like number 4 on the depth chart, and essentially watched practice.
That's got to be an ego slap right there.
Holy crap, man. You talk about having to look in the mirror and say, like, but that's part of it, right? And that's where you really learn that small difference between being decent, being good, being great is mental, right? It's how resilient you are, the attention to detail. And so it was a struggle. All that to say, my first fall camp was pretty rough.
So this first fall camp, was this still Erickson as the coach?
Yeah, I played 2 years for Erickson, 1 year for Riley.
Okay. So you played there. Now was James Newsom there? Was he the big dog as the receiver?
Yep, Newsom was there. And he was another guy where we could have a whole show talking about him, because he was like a big brother to me, right? I was number 1, he was number 2. And when we traveled, anytime we were in a hotel, right, we were roommates. And he was like the old man, because we'd all joke. I mean, at the time, we're 19, 18 through, 20, and he was like 25, right? He really wasn't, but he just seemed so much older than all of us. And
Yeah.
He had kids and whatnot, so he was like the old man, and he's
a grown-ass man. Yeah,
he was. I mean, he just physical, and was just a bully on the field, was a bully off of the field, but had a heart of gold. And so, learned a lot from that guy. Learned a lot, but have so many stories of him that we'll share privately. But
so you're at Oregon State. How were you guys as a team? What was your win-loss? Where you had mentioned they were coming off of, beating Notre Dame, should have been national champions.
Agreed. Yep.
Should have been national champions. So that you're coming off that win. How'd you guys do when you were there?
First year we were 5-6, and so did not go to a bowl game.
And who was Jonathan Smith still quarterbacking your first year?
Yeah, Smitty was the quarterback.
Okay.
And this dude, on my recruiting trip, I thought he was one of the coaches, right? He just looked like a coach. He was a small dude, looked like an old man, actually hung out with the coaches. Now that he's a head coach now, not surprising to anybody. And if I had a kid that was going to college, I would tell him to play for Jonathan Smith any day of the week.
Okay.
But Smitty was the quarterback. I think Sports Illustrated that year had us predicted to be like the top team in the country, coming off of that Fiesta Bowl win, even though had lost a lot of the key players on that team, like Chad Johnson and TJ, Hushmanzada, and a bunch of other people. So our first game of the year, we go down to Fresno and we play Fresno State. And they have David Carr is their quarterback. They have some other receivers. I mean, that team was damn good. And they had a really good year that year. And
that's when they started becoming really good.
And they curb stomped us, right?
And they were tough. They hit you in the mouth.
To the point that they did illegal things, right? Like our punt returner, Eric Williams, was looking up to the sky waiting for a punt, and the guy just runs right through him, right? And they were just dirty, and that's what they would do to intimidate teams, right? They would just play dirty. But they were actually really good and didn't need to play dirty. We ended up losing that game. I think we barely beat New Mexico State the next game. And, our biggest win that year was we were playing UW at home. That was during the BCS era. UW was ranked pretty high, was competing to go to a BCS, and we ended up beating them, I think, by like 14 at home. So that was like our signature win that year. But we ended the season licking our wounds after the first year. And then the second year, the Derek Anderson Steven Jackson era, really began. We had a bunch of other really good players. We still had, Nick Barnett and Siegler and Dwan Edwards. And we went to the Insight Bowl my junior year. I forget what our record ended up being, but we got our butts kicked by Pittsburgh. It was Larry Fitzgerald's freshman year on that Pittsburgh
yeah, he was
team.
okay.
Yeah, he was all right, You forget you're playing. I mean, literally, you're in awe with your mouth open watching him play. How smooth he was as an 18-year-old kid, right? And then my senior year, we were decent. We beat New Mexico in the Las Vegas Bowl. And that last year under Riley.
Okay, yeah. So the last year's under Riley. I don't know these two gentlemen personally, but they really seem like different kind of dudes, Erickson and Riley.
Yes, they completely different. I will tell you that, and I've said this privately, probably never publicly, but if Riley would have been the coach when I was getting recruited, I wouldn't have went to Oregon State. Like you said, just completely different personalities. And really what the biggest difference to me was the coaching staff, right? It's not always just the head coach, because with a team that big and the way things are run, it's like working in a corporation, right? Very rarely do you see the CEO. Are you interacting with the CEO, right? It's the other leadership positions. And so I just had a better connection with the staff that Erickson had. Eric Yarber as a receiver coach, believe he won a Super Bowl with the Washington Redskins. He still might be the receivers coach for the Rams right now. I know he was for a lot of years. But just, Erickson just had a different mentality. I think we probably led college football with personal foul penalties under Erickson. You were encouraged if one of your teammates was on the field fighting, something's wrong if you're not out there fighting with them. I mean, it was that mentality. Where, under Riley, if you yelled at somebody too loud, you get kicked out of practice, right? And so that's just completely different. They recruited different players, looked at.
I was going to say the recruiting from that too, and Dennis Erickson coming from Miami and having that name and just that swag, and could recruit the Hushmanzadas and Chads out of the smaller colleges or high schools or wherever, can dig them up. And he'd take an outlaw if they could run a 4.3.
Agreed.
Where Riley wouldn't take the outlaw. He wants the high intelligent, fundamental, good leader, good follower, which again, they both have their merits. Agreed. Like as I've gotten older, they both have their merits. But yeah, you're right. As an 18-year-old kid, it's probably a little bit more exciting to play for Erickson than it was for Riley. Riley's a pretty milquetoast dude, but he's a good dude. It's just different.
Agreed. And like, you understand, like I tell people all the time and we were talking the word thug, before the show, right? and there's a lot of thugs, right, that I know that could run corporations, right? That are smart, that are strategic, that are all of those things. You look and what you would say is a good leader. There's just some other baggage that comes with that, right? And it takes and it takes a certain personality, I think, to be able to harness that and say like here's the stuff you got to get rid of, right? And really focus on this goodness to move your way forward. And Erickson had a very special way of doing that for people.
Yeah, I mean, you look at a guy like Ray Lewis, who is speaking for corporations and is this motivational guy, and even a guy who early in his career is suspected of murder during the Super Bowl, and turns it into, he was around the right people that harnessed that energy and harnessed that leadership where he could have really have gone the other way. So Erickson was special that way. And there's guys that can do that. That's why there's schools that can have outlaws and schools that can't. And if you don't have the right guy, you go from Florida being national championships to Florida having convicted felons within the next few years.
Agreed.
And just going downward is because the leadership changed. So
Yeah.
you played. How's it feel being a receiver when they're handing the ball to a monster like Steven Jackson and he's running for 1,500 yards in a college season, and you're a receiver, you might only get 2 or 3 targets a game. How's that feel?
We actually still threw the ball a lot. I mean, we ran the spread offense under Erickson, right?
Okay.
And so, you'd have 4 or 5 wide. You'd have Stevie J, lined up in the slot. But it was a lot of fun blocking because when you know that you have a running back there that is special and at any given moment can break 80-yard run, can break a 50-yard run, and you never wanted it to be your guy that you were supposed to block to bring him down, right? And so as a receiver, I thought it was great. I mean, and you talk about a guy who just a high-class dude from the day he walked in to the day he left and even now, right? Understood the value of the team, always, his success was our success. And so, I personally never felt any kind of way, and there was always enough balls to spread around. And at that time, he was running the ball. I mean, Jay New was, had 1,000-yard receiving season, right? I mean, so there were enough balls to go around.
Okay, that's good. That's we want to keep that kind of language in context. Sounds like either you're at the football field or you're in prison. So you're at Oregon State. You're a big receiver. You're a slot receiver. Looking at your stats, you had a better sophomore or junior year than senior year.
Yeah.
Did you have any aspirations for the NFL? Did you think, shit, I was in high school and didn't think I could go to college. I'm in college and I don't know about it. Did you think maybe Kenny Farley could be in the NFL?
Of course. I think that's what motivates you to get up every day to compete, right? And go through and put your body and your mind through the things that you have to do, right? So yeah, definitely had aspirations. Also understood that, I had a better chance of going and buying a lottery ticket and getting a jackpot, right? I mean, I was always aware of that as well. And so yeah, I mean, I didn't have the greatest hands, right?
Okay.
In full transparency. I mean, I was a big guy. I loved contact. I think it was at my senior year where I started thinking like, maybe I should have played defense, right? I like hitting people. I don't like getting hit by people, right? Much prefer hitting people. Love special teams. Was on all.
Kind of sounded like that defensive end position was better for you in high school, maybe.
Yeah, and it was just, but it's one of those things that life plays out the way life plays out, and for me, to learn a new position and play it at the Division I level was pretty good. And I think if I was more mentally focused and more mentally locked in my senior year, I would have had an opportunity to play at the next level, right? And it was just mentally I gained weight before my senior year. The numbers and stats showed, the things that were happening off the field, right? Was focused on the wrong things. And so still had an opportunity, had our pro day, pulled my hamstring running the 40. And clocked the 4.5, and I'd say right at the, say that again.
Because you were out of shape?
No, I was actually in shape. And I think that was like the frustrating part. Coming into that season, I was out of shape. After the season ended, I went back to Southern California, worked out with a Olympic track coach, and lost a ton of weight, came back the lightest I think I had ever been, just shredded, right? I think I was like 215 with like no body fat, just shredded, right? In best shape in my life. And Yeah, it's the way it goes. And pulled my hamstring, right? When I was out of shape, didn't hurt anything, right? And in good shape, running that 40, pulled it. And so then went and did the University of Hawaii's pro day, because it was a couple of weeks after Oregon State's pro day, just to see if I could get my hamstring to heal a little bit. Ran there, but just wasn't 100%, right? And so was really frustrated. My agent at the time said, hey, there's some opportunities to go play in Canada. You can rehab it there. And I think at that point I was just emotionally, mentally done. Was just like, this is where, football ends. So
yeah, and it ends for everybody at different times. Some people
yeah.
it ends in third grade. Some
Yeah.
people it ends in high school. Some people it ends in college. Father Time's undefeated. He's just a matter of when he gets you, right? And that's just the way it goes. When it's your time, it's your time. So now you're done with that. You're out of school. OSU's in the rearview mirror. What's life like right after college? Like, did you know what you wanted to do? Did you know where to go to get a job? What were you thinking?
Dude, it was hard. And I'll tell you, when your whole life, your whole identity is athlete, right? And this season, this month, this time, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then to now walk out into the world and say, I no longer have that structure. People don't know who I am, don't give a crap who I am. Struggle. So when I say depression is real, it's real, right? And it's and it was really hard. And I walked away with school with a degree in sociology. And so was like, crap, what am I going to do? So right after graduation, I moved home, back to Southern California, lived out in the San Fernando Valley, went into Nordstrom, and they have a yearly sale. That's called their anniversary sale. It was about to start. I walked in there and got a job selling women's shoes, right? Got hired on the spot. And that's what I did for about 3 months.
So you were a real life Al Bundy, like ex-football player selling women's shoes.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And so then Oregon was like my home after that, right? After spending those formidable years in college. And so it didn't feel right being back in Southern California. And so I moved back, and that's when I moved to Wilsonville. And so moved there in an apartment, sight unseen. My girlfriend at the time found a place for me. And so I moved there and started, and then I sold women's shoes at the Clackamas Town Center and then at Washington Square. And so, lived in Wilsonville. We'll fast forward through some things. I mean, my sister with Chris, my oldest nephew, RJ, who and then my niece Keisha was a little baby. They moved up with me to Wilsonville. And while they were with me, I had transitioned from working at Nordstrom to going into the electrical apprenticeship. And I got that job because a girlfriend in college, her dad owns a large electrical construction company in Portland. He got me into the apprenticeship. And so, and my sister was working at Hollywood Video in Wilsonville, I believe. And I forget which coach she came across that was coaching at Wilsonville. And I believe that was my connection of how I started coaching at Wilsonville.
I was gonna say, so the Hollywood, by the time I met you, because I used to work at Blockbuster Video with a guy named Jesse Reed, who when Blockbuster closed, he ran the Blockbuster Video in Wilsonville. He ran the one in West Lynn on 10th Street first, and then he ran the one in Wilsonville. So I wonder if she ever worked for him. So interesting story too about the coaching at Wilsonville. So Doug Summers, head coach. And for those who don't know, I coach with Doug Summer at Milwaukee. He gets the head job at Wilsonville. We coached there, and I think we were there maybe a year or two before you got there. And he says, "Hey, I got a line on this guy. He's going to be, he could be a good receiver DB coach for us." And so I was like, "Okay." So in you come, and again, I had no idea. I didn't know who the guy was, like who Doug had been talking to. And you started showing up, and after a couple of times of seeing you, Doug pulls me aside and he goes, "I don't think that's the guy I think it is. I think it was supposed to be a different guy." And I said, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And he goes, "No, that's not the guy." He said the guy who he had met, who had introduced you to him, was actually talking about a different guy. And this different guy, I don't know what happened between then and there, but Kenny, you weren't the dude. you were another guy that this guy knew. And so Doug, for the longest time, not the longest time, but for right off the bat, when we got to know you and you were like, "Oh yeah, I played receiver at Oregon State," Doug's like, "Huh? Like that's not the background of this guy that you told me about." So who was you had gotten that job or gotten wind of that job through Camille?
Yeah.
And Camille knew somebody who said, "Hey, they're looking for coaches at Wilsonville."
If I remember, I need to go, but that's the way that I remember. I mean, it was a long time ago, but yeah, that's the way I remember it. And it was like, yeah, I'll go coach.
So did you apply at the school, or did you go talk to Doug? How did you get in there? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I don't.
That's interesting. I'll have to go back to Doug on that one. And I wonder if it was me telling Jesse we need people at Wilsonville, and him telling Camille and her telling you. But yeah, just like I said, I don't know if you ever heard that story, but you were not the guy that Doug thought you were. and then I was just like, well, I don't know. Shit, he seems pretty good. He seems like, the kids like him. He knows his stuff. Let's go with him. And so he's like, okay. So mom was the word just between me and Doug. We didn't tell anybody else. Funny story. I need to have you and Doug on a show, and we'll hash that out. So you come to Wilsonville again. You're moving back up. There's culture shock too with Wilsonville if you're coming from the LA area. I mean, you're looking at, there was culture shock from me coming from Portland to Wilsonville, let alone LA to Wilsonville. So now you're kind of in that. Not only is it all white, but now it's upper class. Like you're getting into that. Besides the coaching staff, who I know you enjoyed thoroughly because we were fucking awesome. How did you enjoy that experience with the kids and the parents and the community?
It was awesome. I really enjoyed the kids. The community, the parents. It was different for me in a lot of ways. And it is what really stood out to me. And I know this happens in California. This just wasn't my story. And so it was different, right? When you talk to the kids and they had played with each other through youth football, and now we're coming to high school, and the quarterback had always been the quarterback and the running back had been, and so those dynamics, and all the parents knew each other, and that dynamic was different for me from the way I grew up, just because there were so many kids that cycled through and went to different schools. But the personality of the kids were great. I mean, we had some characters on that team, right? And I still felt young enough at the time to really relate to them. And just, the thought process was just different, even in the way that the kids talked, because, I know at that age, we were talking about, I'm going to go play for USC, or I'm going to go play here, whether it was a reality or not, right? Like that was like the drive. And for me, it almost felt like a lot of kids had already accepted that their story was going to end in high school, right? Which I thought was interesting.
Well, because they had options after high school.
Yeah.
And their dads owned businesses, and they knew that they were going to do this or that, or they knew they were going to go to college and get a BA in business or do that. And that's the difference between coming from multi-stream 6-figure incomes in your family and food stamps. Like if you don't know what you're going to do after high school, like you said, you didn't know what you were going to do.
Yep.
And so you had to find your way into it a little bit. And you were lucky in a sense that your girlfriend did have an opportunity, so you become this electrician, which we'll talk about later, kind of, get you into what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Not, it kicks you off. And so those kids all knew kind of like, I've got a safety net. I can just, mom and dad will pay for me to go to college. And they were great kids. What surprised me is the small percentage of them that were really entitled and truly entitled, because there were a few that were just like, oh, you're just a little shit. And you're just this entitled little Wilsonville kid. Fuck you. But that was such a small percentage. Most of those kids were just really, really good, fun kids. I was there for 4 years and I had a great time. And a lot of those kids are still through social media, they're grown ass men now.
Yeah.
I got there, I was 30, or 29, 30, somewhere around there. And so those kids now, it's been almost 20 years since I got there, and those kids are in their 30s and have families and are doing their thing. So it's really fun to see them. If I said, give me just one memory, like when I say, hey, you coached at Wilsonville, what's like the first memory that pops into your head?
God, that's
or image, or like, what do you think of when you think of Wilsonville football, your time there?
There's just some names and some personalities that really that touched me in different ways, right? And I'll say all the kids were special, right? But there were just some, Michael McKelvey, right? That, guy after my own heart, receiver, great kid to be around. And so the moment with him was really senior night, right? When he's walking out with his parents, and he has tears coming down, and another moment of realizing the impact you've had on a kid, right? Which I thought was pretty cool. KJ and all of our banter that we would go through back and forth, right? And we all know the unfortunate, what happened there, but and I was happy I was able to actually have conversations with him months before he passed, right? But him in high school, I used to call him Little Barry Sanders, right? And just his toughness and tenacity, really,
and his smile.
Yeah, we're just,
and both of those guys, you knew they'd be successful, and they both had that shit-eating grin smile.
Absolutely,
that was just amazing. Like, they could tell you no, and you'd still laugh. Like,
absolutely, and just having, and then Julian, right? He just
Escobedo. Still, I love still talking to him on social media. Him and Adrian, they're great kids.
Yeah, and like I said, and you can go down the roster of kids. But yeah, there were just moments, and it was very rarely for me the moments on the field, right? It was like the little conversations you would have, like you said, just the little facial expressions, right? When Doug would be yelling about something, right, and you'd have McKelvey being a goofball and making some face, or KJ talking shit under his breath, like, watch this, coach, and just things like that really stand out to me.
Yeah, and the older you get, you don't realize it when you're in it, but the older you get, the more you realize it's about the relationships. Like, every now and then for certain teams, I can tell you our win-loss, but I can always tell you what so-and-so did on a certain game. Or I can remember lining up against Hillsborough when Colt Laerla was a sophomore, and him coming out to return a punt, and he was hurt, I believe, earlier in the year, and he comes out, and here comes this 6'6", 235-pound high school sophomore who was very obviously on steroids, and came in like Tecmo Bo Jackson and returns the punt against us, and our kids are flying everywhere. And that was his junior year. I remember that we lost to them in overtime, and that was the year they won the state title. And they were really, really good, and we battled them. So, and again, I couldn't tell you the score. I believe it was in the 40s somewhere. And I couldn't tell you the score, but I could tell you that our kids played their hearts out, which was, a lot of those kids had heart and they had grit. And more so than you would think from like an uppity white school, essentially.
Yep.
So yeah, those were great times. And then the coaching memories, again, I'm sitting here talking to you 20 years later almost.
Yeah.
And, you know, I saw Jason Millam last summer over at Doug's house. And I mean, and Coach Nichols, Mike Nichols, I saw him we went to play at Wilsonville for basketball when I was coaching at Milwaukee. And I go in there and he's still setting up the chairs for the basketball game. And, you know, and this, again, this logo, this wasn't what we used, but this was the Wilsonville logo at the time. I did also dig up out of the archives.
Wow.
There's a picture of you with Knicks. And now, where were we playing? Was this where we were going to play Ashland maybe, and we stopped off in Oregon to do a walkthrough?
It must have been. Yeah. Wow.
I think we were playing Ashland. So I found, and this was the era of not brand new, but you just started getting phones in your camera in the 2000s. And so I went through and didn't even realize there's another one with you and Coach Stipich.
Yeah.
And then one with you and my daughter Bailey.
Yeah. Wow.
And yeah, those were, and again, you're seeing those and you're like, oh my God, now you're getting flooded with memories.
I know, absolutely. And, wow.
Yeah, going on. And that had to kill you being on Oregon's field, first of all.
Never won there. Never won there.
No, that's tough. It's tough for an OSU guy. But those are the kind of memories that, like I said, you get kind of flooded and you get those memories and those relationships. So that's great. And we had a lot of fun. I always had a lot of fun with you. Like I started off the show saying you were slapping asses and jumping on backs, and you were such an energetic young coach. And we would break this was another one that killed me, Kenny, is we would break, like we'd be at the 50 at warmups and we'd break, and I would take my guys to the end zone to do, lineman stuff. Yeah. And you'd take your guys basically to the other sideline furthest away with the receivers. Doug and I would watch as you would run away, and you still had the athletic stride, and you're still this big, tall, athletic guy. And by the time I got to the end zone, I'm huffing and puffing and I'm walking. And I was like, I hate that guy for being so athletic. But yeah, and the Sunday meetings with the coaches was great. And I mean, that's the kind of stuff that will stay forever. So I'm glad that Doug made that mistake and that we got you. We still talk about it to this day. Like I said, we'll get you and Doug on and we'll clear it up. But for some reason, we ended up with you instead of some other guy, and God bless us for that. So with Wilsonville, if you could pick out just one or two, what would be like the good lessons that help you on later in life, either with your family or with work or whatever? What'd you learn there that you took on that you've used forever?
So do you remember Johnny?
Of course. Well, Johnny Reagan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think about him a lot for this reason. When you talk about a kid who looked like a man as a freshman, right?
Played for us as a freshman.
And I remember we were doing 7-on-7 and we're in Salem, and he is by far the guy, right? The dude. But in his mind, I remember him saying, well, I'm a freshman and they're like juniors and seniors. And I'm like, that doesn't matter. Physically, mentally, you are the most gifted person out here, right? And I think we put him in situations that he wasn't necessarily comfortable with. And so what I've taken away from that, and I've had my own version of that in my life, is one, people aren't going to people that like care about you in a business situation or in a performance situation aren't going to put you in a position to fail, especially when your failure is going to have impact on them, right? Like we wouldn't have put Johnny out there if we didn't think he could do it, because we're going to look like idiots, right? And he's going to hurt the team, right? And just like in a business, right? you're not going to get put in a situation that they're knowingly going to put you in to fail. And so I carry that. And I've been in those situations where I've come home crying, right? Like, I'm going to fail. And then I have to remind myself of that, right? Of, I am capable, and these stories I'm telling myself in my mind are just stories in my mind, right? And so I tie that back to him, very much so. And really from Wilsonville, the other things I take is just the value of relationships. And like you said, our coaches meeting on the weekends, how important that was. It was about football, but it was also about bonding, and it was about life, right? And being around the team. Like you said, the best memories weren't between the lines. It was in practice and, talking about things or just having those side conversations. And so, and for me, I've just learned the importance of relationship and networking, which is why I am as effective as I am in my career and what I do, right? And how important relationship building is, are two things that I walk away from Wilsonville.
Yeah. Fun relationships. You talk about the off the field and the out of the line stuff. Again, the other memory that just came flooding back to me was coaching with Josh Fink, who had been there forever and strength and conditioning and coached football. And, Josh was a short guy, but he was like yoked out. And, he was like, we called him SpongeBob because he's just like a square, just this little dude. And he always gave me shit for being fat, and I always gave him shit for being short, but there was nothing but love in between us. We testing the headphones on our first game together, our first home game together, and I'm standing in the end zone. And he goes, hey, he's up in the box, and he says, hey, get out of the end zone. Like, you're gonna make a crater in there. Somebody's gonna turn an ankle in that hole. And I was like, motherfucker, you can't see me without a booster seat. How are you even seeing me from the box? We had a couple of kids standing nearby that were warming up, and they're just laughing. But they're like, oh, these guys love each other. They're brothers. Yeah. And those were just some of the great things. So Doug's there through the 2009 season. He leaves. Most of the staff leaves with him. Yeah. Did you coach any sports at any level after Wilsonville?
I did, and actually, Doug's got me set up with Smythe over at Lake Ridge, and so I ended up going over there and coached. It was 2 years, but really it was 1 year, and I call it 1.5 years because that was a point in my life where my career was really starting to take off, and like we had talked about, right, coaching. I don't people understand how much time coaching takes. Right.
If you're going to do it right.
If you're going to do it right. Right. It's the games, it's the practices, it's watching game film. It's all of the things, prepping for practice. It's all of those things, right, that really take time. And I didn't have that time, and it was becoming more of a strain. So I coached there 1 year where I was actually there for practices and whatnot. Had some great relationships. It reminded me very much of Wilsonville, right? I would say the money aspect went up a level out in Lake Oswego and with the Lake Ridge people, but amazing kids. Tom Smythe was great to work under. He was in the twilight of his coaching career, but learned a ton from him and just the people, that he had coached that would come back around and hearing their stories and, all of that was really fun, right? And so then that following year, I told Smythe, like, hey, I can't commit to coming to practices. And so he's like, oh, just come to games, right? Just show up on Friday nights and stand on the sideline and then, coach up the kids. And we like just having, you around the program. And so I did that the next year. And then after that was just done just because I'm one of those people, if you're going to do it. If you're not, don't. Right. And so, yeah. And so then that was the last time I've coached was at Lake Ridge.
So talking about time and needing to be away from the game and doing things that are more important than coaching, tell us about your relationship with your nephew, RJ.
Man, it's a Before I dive into that, it's my relationship with my nephews and my niece, right? I have been blessed to have three nephews and a niece that I have a relationship with. And then I have a niece and then another one that's coming in a couple of months that live in Brazil that I have not met yet, right? But with the one stateside, they are my children. And so Chris was older, and during the Wilsonville days, he actually went to elementary school in Wilsonville, but then he moved with his dad to California. And so RJ, me and that kid, he lived with me when I was coaching at Wilsonville. He then left, went and lived with his dad for a number of years, moved back to Oregon with my sister when he was like in the 5th grade. And then I think started in the 6th grade. He started living with me full time just because my sister was moving back to Southern California. My nephew loved Oregon. And so, he stayed. And so I have been that parent figure for him. His dad is in his life. My sister is in his life. And so I'll never disrespect either one of his parents and say I was his parent. But I got to play that role for him. And now he's a college graduate and living in Japan. And so it has been in just that journey through him, with him, right? Grew up in the Beaverton youth sports, went to Southridge High School, was a late bloomer, was a super scrawny kid who wasn't competitive, just liked being on the team for the social aspects. And so which was a struggle for me, right? Because I'm competitive as hell and want to win. And why are you going out there if you don't care if you win or lose, right? I mean, that's just how I'm built. And for him, it was, he played football 1 year and we found out pretty quick football is not his thing, right? At all. And I was okay with that. But he was that kid that played the minimum amount of plays you have to play, right? And he was on the sideline. And I was pissed. Like, what the? But after the game, he was super excited. Uncle Kenny, did you see that? Did you see this? And it was like, yep, I got to accept that that's him, right? And so, and when I say it was a privilege to raise him, the fact that we were so different, I grew a lot as a person, as a man, having the opportunity to raise him. And I hope I did the same for him and his growth. Right. And we talked about there's somebody else, Jody, who's been a partner of mine for a long time. We've been friends for many years and in a relationship. People ask how long all the time, and I'll say a decade, but I don't know the exact timing of that. But it would be disrespectful to say, hey, I was the only person that raised RJ. She was a huge influence on both of us, because I swear we spoke a different language, him and I sometimes, right? And it took that person to say, nope, you got to show up different. And so yeah, it was a journey, a really cool journey, to be with him, to support him. And so, it's hard not to smile when I talk about him. I love that kid. I really do.
Yeah. And I know you had the multiple nieces and nephews. I think about RJ more because, I knew RJ from coming to practice and hanging out, and he was about Bailey's age. And so they're both hanging out in the stands during practice and, going trick-or-treating with him over at my grandma's house, and I think of him. He always, when I had one image of him, I always think of the old show Mad TV when they had the UPS man. He would bounce around and he'd be like, hey. And he couldn't stop moving. That was RJ as a kid, and I love hearing about him. And we talked before the show about all the cool stuff he's doing, and he's got this whole life ahead of him, and he's doing the traveling thing, and he's living that, and that only happens if you have somebody who, we talk about like our coaches. You talk about like, oh God, I had some shitty coaches. You never wanted to be that coach. I look at my coaches and I go, boy, my coaches never even presented college to me, and I look back at my measurables and go, man, that I was way better than some of these kids that are actually going and playing in college. But my coaches never thought of that. So I always wanted to be the coach that during their sophomore year said, hey, what do you think about playing?
Yeah.
And Doug has been a big influence that way. Like you said, when you got into coaching, you saw how Doug was always telling the kids, like, do you want to go somewhere? I'll help you.
Yeah.
And would get recruits and get recruiters and get film out there. And that was the age of DSV, and Huddle was just getting in there, and the video started becoming a thing. And so I think that you kind of instilled in RJ the things that you didn't get as much. Yeah. And he's got that great springboard. And although he did go to University of Oregon, that's his fatal flaw with your relationship, is that he went to Oregon and you're not an Oregon household, to say the least. Okay, so you're done playing, you're done coaching. RJ's getting older and doing his thing. You mentioned earlier, we had put a pin in it earlier about you being in the electrician. You were the what do you call the apprentice, right?
Yep.
At the beginning. Okay. Yep. So, and we could have a whole 6-hour show on the jobs that you've done and the places that you've done them. Give us kind of a brief rundown from that to what you're doing now, because you've worked some incredible jobs and done some incredible things in some incredible places. So we talked about it earlier. You can kind of skim across the rim of all of them, because if you get too deep, you'll be here and your 2 weeks in Oregon will be over. But yeah, let us know what you've been doing.
All right. So I went through the IBEW Local 48 out of Portland, electrical apprenticeship. Got out of that program with an electrical license in Oregon and Washington, which I still hold today. I don't actively use them anymore, but I'm not taking that test again. So I keep them current. So I worked for a couple of small electrical contractors doing residential, industrial, commercial electrical work. Then got on with a company out in Clackamas, a small fabrication company that did some really cool projects with the government, right? And so we had a nuclear group building different containment systems for nuclear. We built bridges, had a marine group building boats for like Navy SEALs and some other purposes within the government and the military. Was on working on streetcars. We built streetcars for the city of Portland. They're still going around down in Northwest Portland. And then we built some for DC, built some for Tucson. And so I was always on the electrical side of the projects, right? And so I went from being, somebody working with the tools, then moved into project management, moved into program management, and then hit a point in my career where I just put in my resignation. And I remember the VP at the time, like, where are you going? Where are you going? I said, I don't know. I'm just bored and I want to do something else. And he's like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't think the job I want exists. And so he took the time and we sat down and I said, it looks like this. It feels like this. And he's like, sounds like you want to be in business development and sales. And I said, sure, if that's what it's called, right? And so then I moved into that, right? And so at that time, that company had gotten bought by another company. And so I spent my time in business development and sales pursuing missile programs that protects the United States from incoming nuclear warheads. So had a big program, was able to pursue projects there, pursued projects in our marine side of our group. And so was able to travel all over the country, out of the country, really all supporting the warfighter, right, is really what my career has been in. And so now about 2.5 years ago, started working for a company right outside of Denver, where we build containment systems. So the easiest way, one of our products, our custom products, are glove boxes, right? And so if you've ever seen a movie with a stainless steel box and you see an operator put their hands in some gloves and they're working on something inside of a box, that's a very simple box, and they get more complex and larger than that. But that's primarily what we do. We're a design, engineering, and manufacturing company. So I lead all business development. So sales, marketing, estimating rolls through me, and we are on a journey to become $100 million company. So that's what keeps me busy. I split time between Tigard, Oregon, where I am now. Have a place out in Denver, Colorado, but I spend most of my time on an airplane. So, but I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah. How much time, if you were to throw a percentage on it, are you between Oregon and Colorado? I'm not going to audit you on it, so just give me a number.
Let's say 30 here, 30 there, and then 40% on the road.
Yeah.
Somewhere else. I'll tell you this. So this past year, I did not have a place in Colorado. I was just working remote, primarily from Portland, and then flying to Denver, flying to other places. And I spent a little over 200 nights in a hotel last year in 2024.
That's got to be a wear on your body and your mind. That's like the professional wrestlers, and they just get so burned out so quick. And you're a relatively young guy, but man, you're getting a little long in the tooth for that too. That lower back's got to be hurting at some point.
Yeah, it's a lot. It becomes a lot, and you just and that's where it goes back to sports, right? And it goes back to I'm competitive as hell, right? And it's like, this is what I have to do to win, right? And so I will do it, and my body hurts, but it's like, to your point, your lower back, right? So now what are the things I need to do to make sure my body holds up, right? Whether it's nutrition or working out or whatever, to make sure I can keep doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. And you've done some really fun things. And again, your Instagram posts are some of the most interesting on my feed. So I know you fell in love with scuba a long time ago.
Oh yeah.
Like I remember when you first started doing the marine stuff, and you were doing the boats, and were you doing the nav systems or the radar systems, something like that on boats?
All the above. All the power distribution system, anything that electricity touched.
Yeah, I remember that you sitting down with you and you saying, man, I fell in love with scuba diving. Like, I never thought you kid growing up in LA, scuba diving. Ain't a lot of brothers in the water either. Like, we grew up in some urban areas. And so, and you were just like, yeah, but I love it so much. And I've seen you in the skydiving and So what else? What are the top things that you've done, like that you've gotten to do because of these jobs?
Oh, that's really the coolest thing that I get to do, really, because of what I do for work, is I get to meet so many different people and immersed in so many different cultures. And people think you have to leave the United States to, immerse yourself in a different culture. You don't. Right. I mean, the way people are in Knoxville, Tennessee, Huntsville, Alabama, New Orleans, Louisiana, and all those little small towns in between those places, right, are a lot different than the Pacific Northwest. They're different than Southern California, than, Boston, New Hampshire, Florida. And so it's been really cool to really do that. But as far as one of the coolest trips is I was able to go out to South Korea, right? And you talk about culture shock and having to navigate and go order food in a country where it's not catering to English, right? And nobody in the establishment speaks English, right? And you learn a lot about yourself, and you learn a lot about just humans and how we can still communicate without language, right? And so that's been kind of the cool stuff. But yeah, the scuba, and that's what keeps me alive. That's what relaxes me. I fall asleep when I'm underwater sometimes because I get that relaxed, right? Skydiving is one of the scariest things I've ever done in my life, and so I need to do it. Goes back to my nature, right? I did it the first time I jumped. It took everything I had not to pass out, right? So then I went back the next day because I was like, no, I got this and I want to enjoy it, and did it. And so that's my next endeavor, is to get certified to start jumping by myself. Because I've heard that's the only way to really do it. What else have I done? I think just traveling and just cuisine is my thing, right? I mean, I like good food. I like good beer, good wine. I wish I liked hiking, right? That would be cool. I mean, I've been to a lot of places where hiking is great, but I'm like, I'm good. Like,
it's not your bag. It's kind of the basketball of your professional world. It's just like, no, I'm good. Let's go do something else.
Yeah, it's like, send me pictures when you get up to, wow, that seemed real nice. Like, I'm good, but
you're like, yeah, that's just a hard walk.
Yeah, it's just like, I just go to the gym and go do something. Well, don't you want to see nature? Yeah, I'm like, I've seen, once you've seen one sunset, you've kind of seen, but it's, and really scuba has really opened up my world too. I've been able to go to some really cool countries and dive. And
where's the best one? Where's, like, you have to scuba one place before you die. What's your ultimate scuba? What's the best place?
My ultimate, why I started, was to scuba dive in South Africa with great whites. Off of Cape Town.
Fuck that.
Yeah, that's and I know people have done it and they're like, Kenny, even though you are in a cage, you don't understand how big these animals are until the way it was described to me is that they are so big that you don't even feel safe in a cage, right? And I'm like, I'm here for it. Like I've dove with sharks. I mean, was in the Bahamas and we're diving with sharks. There were so many that your brain starts blocking out that they're there so that you can enjoy looking at other things, where you have to then be like, check back in and say, hold on, there's sharks here. I got to pay attention a little bit. But like, and so just great whites. And like Jody, she's dove with tiger sharks and her dream is to dive with hammerheads. And so that'll be on the bucket list to go, you know, but yeah, South Africa would be, I have to. I mean, I've dove in Belize and the Bahamas and Mexico, some really cool places. But yeah, South Africa is it.
Wow. So we'll end up here before we hit the Fab Five. We'll hit up the lighter side of it and what we do here a lot on the aggregate and the sports side of it. Do you still, with your schedule and everything, do you still get to watch a lot of sports?
I do here and there. It's usually background noise, but I do.
Or do you hit up Sports Center, you know? And I mean, because like myself, I don't watch a lot of games anymore until they get to the postseason. Like I'll even watch some postseason baseball, but I don't watch it during the regular season. It's just like fluff.
Yeah.
Basketball, I'll watch a little bit if it's interesting, like the whole Luka LeBron. I had to watch a game the other night that they played, but I won't watch it as much till the playoffs. And same thing with football. I'll watch a red zone, but I won't watch a whole game. Do you catch a Sports Center, or do you just kind of keep up with anything at all?
I keep up through other people, or I'll just check out my ESPN app, or if I'm in town somewhere where there's a live sporting event, I like doing that. That's a cool thing to do, is go check out a new arena or new stadium I've never been to. So yeah, so I still follow my Lakers. Unfortunately, the Raiders. And then during baseball season, if you ever get a chance, go to Rocky Stadium. I will say one of the best places to watch baseball. The Rockies are terrible, but you can get really cheap tickets to watch the other team that's coming in. So that's a hack if you want to go see some cheap baseball and go watch the other team that's coming into town.
Well, and you're probably going to see a few home runs there too. I mean, the balls fly out of that stadium.
Just a few.
Yeah. It's crazy there. All right. Well, let's end up with the Fab Five then. And we'll talk about it a little, get to know you, and then we'll get you out of here and on with your day.
All right.
I did also have this I wanted to show you because I don't know. That's just you and the business picture like that. That's just so Kenny Farley right there. I love it.
Mr. Corporate.
All right, so let's go with number one. You're hitting up Chipotle. What's your go-to Chipotle order?
Oh, go-to would probably be a burrito bowl. What is it? Brown rice, black beans, some fajita vegetables, some chicken, corn, lettuce, cheese, medium salsa. Sometimes guac, but that's if I'm treating myself.
We had Chipotle last night, and you almost just completed my order, except I don't do the corn, but I did chicken, brown rice, black beans, fajita, the lettuce, cheese, sour cream, and salsa.
Okay.
But I like to get the burrito bowl and then get a couple tortillas and make, little burritos out of it too. Or sometimes I'll just eat a bowl. But yeah, I get you. I'm right there with you. All right. Let's go to number two. You're in Vegas. What's your go-to game? What are you spending your time at?
Oh, this is easy, man. Roulette.
You like roulette? Do you get to Vegas very often?
I don't. I'm there maybe once a year. Yeah, twice at the most. I had a nephew that lived there, my youngest nephew, so would go more often, but wouldn't go to the Strip. But on the Strip, maybe once or twice a year. And roulette, I don't gamble a lot. Usually, only when I go to Vegas. And so I don't have a lot of patience to sit and play other games. Like I can play blackjack for a little while. Never poker; it takes too long. But roulette, man, you're either gonna win a lot fast or you're gonna lose a lot fast and be done. So. That's
so. Are you betting red and black, or are you betting on a number?
Oh, I bet numbers, man.
Okay.
So my go-to is usually I have my key numbers I pick 1, 11, 16, 24, sometimes 4, sometimes 30, and I usually play $10 each number.
Okay. Do you play on the number, or are you playing on the line? Are you splitting?
I play on the number.
On the number, all these 35 to 1. You're like, you think you're gonna win big?
Told you, go big or go home, man. And if it's a good day and I'm hitting it, then I'll get excessive at the end of the night and put $100 chip on each number and see what happens. I've never hit with $100 chip, so maybe I should stop doing that.
Well, you're never gonna hit if you don't play, right?
This is true.
Number 3. What's your guilty pleasure song? It comes on, and if anybody else is around, you'll be like, but if you're just by yourself, you'll kind of hit, Barbie Girl comes on, and you kind of bobbing your head to it. What's your guilty pleasure song?
Oh, this is easy. Fantasia, When I See You.
Really?
And so that one I forget. I don't care if people are in the car, I'll play it, right, and rock out to it. But sometimes I'm on the highway, right, and it'd be a warm day and the windows are down and I'm blasting it and I'll get off and I'm at a light and I forget that all the cars are stopped and people are looking at me. That's happened once or twice.
So wait a second. The whole point about a guilty pleasure song is that you have guilt. This sounds like you just don't give a fuck.
Well, then I don't have a guilty pleasure song because there's that's the one where people are like, are you kidding me? But I don't think that I like Barbie Girl's one I like. There's there you go.
So you're feeling it now.
Oh yeah. I got Regina Spektor is another that's probably a guilty pleasure artist where people are like, who the hell is Regina Spektor? And I'm like,
I don't know who that is.
So when you get off of this, just start playing her songs like Samson. There's a couple of other ones. I think that's probably more of a guilty pleasure artist.
Okay. All right. We'll have to check that out. Next one. So if money's not an issue, money doesn't come into play, you can do whatever you want to do in life. It doesn't matter. What would you do? For a career, let me put it that way. For a career, what would you do?
It would be broad term would be social work, but from I would be like a mentor to just kids, right? Because I think the biggest thing that people are missing, right? It's always, hey, if you just give people money, or if you just did this. I think the greatest gift you can give somebody is perspective, right? It's that whole thing. If you give somebody a fish to eat for a day, you teach them how to fish to eat for a lifetime. And what really transformed my life was having mentorship and people. I live in the same world, had the same life, was in the same spot, but was just given a different perspective to navigate through, and it shifted everything. And so I would just do that full time at any given time, would have 10, 15, 20 people that I'm just working with to help them navigate.
Yeah, that's cool. That's much more selfless. I've always told people if I had the means to do it, I would build a facility, multi-basketball courts, and I would host youth games and youth tournaments and high school games and high school tournaments and just watch all day and people watch and watch games. And again, just because I just don't think kids have very good facilities nowadays, and it's hard to find facilities, especially in the metro area. Everything's blown up with athletics, and so everybody's scrambling for gym time. And I would let these teams that can't afford good gym time come play and come practice and then host tournaments. And I always thought that would be really fun. Plus, I like seeing the parents. AAU parents drive me fucking crazy. They're such assholes. Just like
all worst, the kids are going to the NBA. They're just
AAU parents. There's no gray area. Either they're some of the best people you've ever met, or they're just some of the biggest assholes you've ever met. And Sadie is into refereeing now. She referees youth basketball. And I say, hey, 4th and 5th grade, that's great. It's for some reason when they hit 6th grade, when they hit middle school, everybody thinks that they're, this is going to be this NBA or WNBA player. And then the parents become assholes. The kids become assholes. The coach becomes assholes. Yeah. But 4th and 5th grade are great. And fortunately she's young and in high school and still gets to ref a lot of 4th and 5th graders. But that's neither here nor there. All right, let's go to the last one here, and we'll close out with this one. This is a fun one. Which conspiracy theory do you low-key kind of like believe? Like, is it aliens created the pyramids? Is it that aliens are anal probing people? Did JFK get shot by a myriad of people? Like, what's a conspiracy theory you believe?
So I can't go too deep on this one just because of what I do.
Shit. Oh wait, you're under some kind of probably like muffle clause anyway with all the military stuff that you do. This is going to get audited. I'm going to have a black van in front of my house for 3
You won't. I will just say that the political answer, right, is we all operate on need to know, right? And so if you don't need to know, you won't know, right? And so all the people we think are crazy aren't really crazy for some of the things that they believe. I will leave it at that. But on the lighter note, I will say this is that I think there's a conspiracy in the NBA to keep the Lakers from dominating every year.
So is that from the recent pickup of their center that was nixed by the quote unquote physical that would have given them a big center to play with, and the Chris Paul trade that was nixed and all that kind of stuff?
I just think that there's just some things that happen that we don't know about that because you think about the Lakers. I mean, they should be good every single year. I mean, they should be great. Who doesn't want to come play in LA? So yeah.
I'm more concerned about the beginning of your answer. Like, that has some Area 51 fucking shit on there. Like, when you're answering questions, this is all I hear.
Well, and I told Jody, I was going through it with her before, and I was like, this last one, I wonder how I should answer it. And I was like, I'm just going to leave that first part out. And she's like, no, you should say that. And so,
God bless Jody. Like, she's okay. She sounds like she knows what's up. Is she there?
She is not. She is not.
Okay, so I was going to say we're going to say hi to her. We'll get her next time. So yeah, that's we'll leave it to the political answer. You've always been very good at that job. We talked about, you tend to ride the line. You've always been pretty smart with your answers, and now that you're erasing people's memories and Men in Black shit, we'll leave it at that. Well, it's been a pleasure having you. I know I've learned some stuff about you after knowing you for 20 years. I've learned some things I didn't know, and hopefully people watching this, if you send this out to your family and friends or anything like that, will have a good time watching you. We'll do it again, though. We'll have you on another time, okay?
All right, that'd be awesome. I appreciate you. Thanks
Thanks
for having me on. It's great catching up with you.
Absolutely. And we'll go ahead and end the interview, and stick around after the graphic, and I'll get you right back on and we'll talk for a second, okay?
All right.
All right. Have a good one. Thanks, Kenny.
All right, later.